Hot blue ichor spilled from the gaping crater in Antares' carapace. The chitinous plates cracked apart, leaking viscous fluids the young Sakari desperately tried to staunch with trembling claws as his life ebbed away, alone, abandoned by his hive on this accursed alien world. Xyloth listened, his segmented eyes glinting in the dim bioluminescence of the tavern. The scarred veteran had seen many trials in his long years. "What misfortune brought you to such a state, Antares?" The wounded insectoid gulped down a mouthful of glowing nutrient fluid before speaking, his words edged with pain and bitterness. "Our scout ship crashed during a survey mission, damaged drives, failing systems. We made planetfall. Barely." Xyloth nodded. "Surviving an uncontrolled atmospheric entry was no small feat. Your hive did not mount a rescue." Antares shook his head, antennae drooping. Too remote. No distress calls got through. He shuddered at the hellish memories. Crewmates died on impact. More perished from wounds as days stretched into weeks. Those still alive began turning on each other. The hive mind, it fractured. Madness infected us, starvation, desperation, brother slaying brother in a frenzied scramble for dwindling supplies. Xyloth listened gravely, absorbing the tale of horror. To be marooned, dying slowly on an uncharted world, while primal savagery tore apart the very bonds that made the Sakari one cohesive organism, a fate worse than death. "How did you survive such an ordeal?" Antares lowered his gaze. "I almost didn't. Stab wound through my thorax, bleeding out. Discarded to rot with the rest of the dead and dying." His voice dropped to a pained whisper. "That's when the human found me." Xyloth's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "A human choosing to aid one not of his own kind, even at great personal risk. Most unusual." "Indeed," Antares replied, shifting his injured thorax with a wince. "When the crash fractured our hive mind and infighting consumed the survivors, I knew seeking outside help was our only chance. But I never imagined it would come from an alien, let alone a human." "And yet this human tended your grievous wounds without hesitation, without thought for his own limited resources." "He did." Antares' voice resonated with a mix of gratitude and awe. "Using his own medical supplies, he cleaned and dressed the gash in my carapace. The pain was excruciating, but his touch was gentle, precise. I could sense his desire to mend, to heal. It felt foreign to me after so much senseless violence among my own kind." Xyloth stroked his mandibles, deep in thought. "Truly remarkable. And you say he shared his own provisions with you as well?" Antares nodded. His rations were already stretched thin, yet he insisted I partake to keep up my strength. "We'll worry about finding more later," he told me, even as the gnawing ache of hunger surely clawed at him too. "To prioritize the welfare of another over one's own survival." Xyloth shook his head in amazement. "A rare quality, one I have seldom witnessed in all my travels across the stars." "Nor I," Antares agreed quietly. "But there is more. Once I regained some measure of my strength, the human revealed his intention to help establish contact with my hive. Despite his ship being badly damaged itself and his supplies running low, he still wished to aid me further by—" Xyloth clicked his mandibles, his eyes narrowing with concern. "To place such trust in an outsider, especially when your own kind had turned against each other, it must have been a difficult decision." Antares nodded solemnly. "It was, Elder, but something about Patrick's demeanor, the sincerity in his voice, made me want to believe in him. He spoke of his own experiences with loss and isolation, and how he couldn't stand by and watch another suffer the same fate." "Empathy," Xyloth mused. "A rare trait indeed, particularly among humans. They are known for their self-interest and aggression." "Perhaps," Antares agreed, "but Patrick seemed different. He worked tirelessly to modify his communication array, even sacrificing components from his own damaged systems to ensure the signal would be strong enough." Xyloth leaned back, his antennae twitching with interest. "And did his plan succeed? Were you able to contact your hive?" Antares' compound eyes gleamed with emotion. "We were, Elder. It took several attempts and some clever adjustments to boost the signal, but eventually we received a response. My hive had been searching for our lost ship, but without a clear location they had little hope of finding us. Until your human friend intervened, Xyloth remarked, his tone laced with a mix of admiration and disbelief. Indeed, Antares confirmed. Patrick's technical expertise and determination were instrumental in our rescue. When the hive ship finally arrived, they were shocked to find me alive, and even more surprised to learn of the human's role in my survival. Xyloth stroked his mandibles pensively, absorbing the weight of Antares' words. A tragic turn of events indeed. The madness of desperation can drive even the most unified of hives to ruin. His compound eyes fixed on the young Sakari, a glimmer of curiosity in their depths. Tell me, how did Patrick react to the carnage wrought by your kin? Antares' antennae drooped, the memories clearly painful. He was horrified, Elder. The sight of mangled Sakari corpses strewn across the crash site, the wounds inflicted by their own brethren. It was a nightmarish scene. The young insectoid shuddered, his voice lowering to a haunted whisper. But even in the face of such horror, Patrick's compassion never faltered. He helped me tend to the wounded, using what meager medical supplies we had left. His hands, so different from our own, worked with a gentle precision I had never seen before. Xyloth nodded slowly, his interest piqued. Remarkable. To maintain one's composure and empathy in the midst of such chaos is a rare feat. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. And what of the rescue itself? How did your hive react to the human's presence? Antares' mandibles twitched, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. They were shocked, to say the least. The sight of a human standing alongside their wounded scout, surrounded by the wreckage of our ship and the bodies of our fallen. It was a jarring image. The young Sakari's eyes glowed with a newfound respect. But when they learned of Patrick's role in our survival, of his tireless efforts to help us reconnect with the hive, their suspicion quickly turned to gratitude. Xyloth's antennae quivered with surprise. Gratitude? From a Sakari hive to an outsider? That is most unusual. Antares nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the edges of his mandibles. Indeed, Elder, but Patrick's actions had proved him worthy of our trust and respect. The hive leaders even invited him to return with us, to share in our resources as a gesture of thanks. Xyloth's eyes widened, his voice tinged with disbelief. And did he accept this offer? Antares shook his head, a wistful note entering his voice. No, Elder. Though grateful for the invitation, Patrick insisted that he had to continue his own mission. He had risked everything to help us, but he couldn't abandon his own path. The young Sakari's gaze grew distant, as if seeing the human's face in his mind's eye. But before he left, he made me a promise. He said that if ever I found myself in need of aid again, I could call upon him, and he would come, no matter the distance or the danger. Xyloth sat back in his chair, his expression one of quiet awe, a promise of unwavering support, even after all he had already sacrificed. This human, this Patrick Clark, truly embodied the best of his species. The scarred veteran shook his head slowly, marveling at the tale. In all my cycles I have never heard of such selfless dedication from an outsider to a hive not his own. Antares nodded, his own eyes glinting with a newfound understanding. Nor had I, Elder, but Patrick showed me that even in the darkest of times, when all seems lost, there is still hope to be found in the compassion of others. The young Sakari's voice grew stronger, a note of determination creeping in. And that is a lesson I will carry with me always, a lesson taught to me by a human of all beings. Xyloth leaned forward, his compound eyes fixed intently on Antares. The human's fate weighs heavily upon you, young one. I can see the sorrow etched in your carapace. Antares nodded slowly, his antennae drooping with the weight of his memories. It haunts me, Elder, the sight of Patrick lying there, his lifeblood spilling onto the barren ground. It was a betrayal of everything he had done for us. The scarred veteran reached out, placing a comforting appendage on Antares' shoulder. You must not blame yourself, Antares. In the heat of the moment, With tensions running high, even the most level-headed of warriors can act rashly. "But I should have done more," Antares cried, his voice cracking with emotion. "I should have stood between Patrick and the warrior's blade. I should have made them see reason, made them understand that without the human, none of us would have survived." Xyloth shook his head. "You did all you could, young one. In the chaos of the rescue, with the hive's mind still fractured from the infighting, it's a miracle that you were able to get through to them at all." Antares looked down at his trembling claws, the memory of Patrick's blood still vivid in his mind. "I can still hear his voice, Elder. As I was dragged away by my own kin, leaving him to die alone on that forsaken planet. He called out to me. Not in anger or bitterness, but with compassion. He told me to live well, to honor the second chance he had given me." Xyloth's antennae twitched with surprise. Even in the face of death, the human thought only of your well-being. Truly, he was a remarkable individual. Antares nodded, a single tear sliding down his carapace. "He was, Elder. Patrick Clark embodied the very best of humanity, their capacity for kindness, for selflessness, for hope in the face of overwhelming darkness, and I let him down." The old warrior leaned back in his seat, his gaze distant. "No, Antares. You carry his legacy forward. By sharing your story, by keeping his memory alive, you ensure that his sacrifice was not in vain. The human's compassion lives on through you, and through all those who hear of his bravery." Antares looked up, meeting Xyloth's eyes with a newfound determination. "You're right, Elder. I may not have been able to save Patrick's life, but I can honor it. I can strive to be the kind of Sakari he believed in, the kind who looks beyond species and sees the potential for good in all beings." Xyloth nodded, a faint smile playing at the edges of his mandibles. "That is a noble path, young one. The human would be proud to know that his actions have inspired such growth and understanding." Antares took a deep breath, his voice steady with resolve. "I will not let his sacrifice be forgotten, Elder. I will carry Patrick Clark's memory with me, always. And I will work tirelessly to build bridges between our species, to foster the kind of compassion and cooperation that he embodied." The old warrior raised his glass, the bioluminescent liquid casting an eerie glow across his battle-scarred features. "To Patrick Clark, the human who showed us the best of his kind, may his legacy endure, and may his spirit guide us towards a brighter future." Antares lifted his own glass, the weight of his promise lending strength to his voice. "To Patrick Clark, my savior and my friend, I will not let you down." As the two Sakari touched their glasses together in a solemn toast, the tavern seemed to grow quieter, as if the very universe itself were paying respects to the fallen human. And in that moment, Antares knew that no matter the challenges he might face, he would never waver in his commitment to honoring Patrick Clark's memory. For in the human's selfless act of compassion, he had shown the young Sakari the true meaning of courage, and had forever changed the course of his life. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.